Hello rockers! We have another episode dedicated to rock music in various games.
And today we have the first game from the incredibly famous and popular series Grand Theft Auto or GTA. From the very beginning, here in the video I will mention a lot of people, and if any of them will watch it, I apologize if I suddenly mispronounce your name. The first game was released in the second half of 1997. The game was first released on computers, MS-DOS and Microsoft Windows, and later on PlayStation and Game Boy Color.
I didn't play it then. The first GTA I played was GTA 3, released in 2001.
The whole series of GTA games has a cool soundtrack, implemented in the form of several radio stations with different genres. Here we have pop music, rap, dance hits and of course rock music. In the very first GTA, the soundtrack was also implemented in such a way that you could listen to the car radio. There are several radio stations with different genres. I don't think you need to represent GTA, but it's a series of action-adventure games. The action takes place in fictional cities, the streets of which become an arena for races, gang fights, wars with the police, robberies, and just a huge amount of everything else.
The first two games in the series were 2D.
So, GTA 1 has 3 fictional cities where you make money doing work for the mafia. Tasks will be given to you by the phone. You choose one of the 8 characters, get behind the wheel of a car and
You hear one of several radio stations.
NCT-FM, Rap and Hip Hop, Radio 76 FM, Funk, Head Radio, Rock and Techno, The Fix FM, House and Dance, It's Unleashed FM, Rock and Alternative, The Fergus Buckner Show FM, Country, Brooklyn Underground FM, Techno, Drum and Bass. Each station has 3 songs only except the Fergus Buckner Show FM. There is only 1 song. A total of 19 original tracks for the entire game.
What do we have here from rock music?
From what I would refer to rock, these are all 3 songs from It's Unleashed FM, Sticky Fingers, 4 Letter Love, The Hounds, Let It Out. These 2 are 100% classics. But the last, Bleeding Stump, Just Do It, I would say 50-50. The track is cool, but there is a lot mixed up, so decide for yourself. On the game Wave Radio 76 FM, of 3 tracks, 2, namely Ghetto Fingers on the Move and Ashtar Aori, I would refer to something close to rock music. It's funk, but there are such tasty guitar solos, especially in the track Aori, that I would attribute it to the rock soundtrack. And finally, the track Complications by Ohjamo, from the repertoire of Head Radio, which is 100% rock and stylistically reminds me a little bit of stoner, psychedelic and desert rock.
Now about the creators.
All the names of bands and artists in the soundtrack are fictitious. Behind the whole soundtrack there are several musicians. That is, all this diversity of genres in GTA 1 was created by several people, not a few really existing bands. The main composers are Colin Anderson, Craig Connor and Grant Middleton. Craig Connor from Aberdeen, Scotland.
In his early years, he played in various bands, wrote music.
As a music producer, he joined a small DMA company in 1995. DMA or DMA Design Limited, which is now a video game development studio, is now called Rockstar North Limited and is based in Edinburgh. It was then, in the middle 90s, that he began producing and writing the soundtrack for a small, at that time of course, project called Grand Theft Auto. Craig Connor also worked with sound for other games in the series. Here is a list of games in which he worked with sound for clarity. No comments. Most likely, this is not all, because new games will still be released. Colin Anderson, ex-head of DMA Designs, who was responsible for the soundtrack for GTA. He can be thanked for such a thing as a radio in the game. Radio with a variety of stations has become one of the hallmarks of the game. When he was working on the game as a member of the music department of DMA Designs in Dundee, Scotland, he came up with the idea and he shared it with Craig Connor, who at the time was creating tracks that the tracks could be separated by genre and thus create several radio stations.
The radio was placed in the car and in fact the idea is great.
Anderson recalls that the introduction of radio has changed everything. In the early stages, the soundtrack had to be based on MIDI, because the game had to be released also on N64 and PC. But it only released on PlayStation. The port for N64 and PC was cancelled then. And then the team was able to focus on making the sound better, because now it was made for only one platform, PlayStation.
And this became the calling card of the game and the whole series.
Grant Middleton, a musician who started recording electronic music from 1990. He has a music project Under the Dome, a Scottish band that plays electronics, which pays tribute to the golden era of electronic albums, the 1970s. Also, Grant Middleton is a member of the band Cosmic Smokers, which also plays electronic music. He also worked in Dundee on the soundtrack of the first GTA. While working there, he first met Colin Anderson. Grant asked Colin if he would join Under the Dome full-time, and secondly, he was able to put his early cassette records in order because the Pro Tools 3 software and hardware system could be used outside of business hours. This music became part of what is now the band Under the Dome. Not rock, of course, but good and quality electronic.
And that's not everyone who created music tracks.
In addition to Colin Anderson, Craig Connor and Grant Middleton, who are listed as the main composers, also participated in the creation of the soundtrack Stuart Ross, John Gurney, Robert De Nigro, Alan Walker, Brian Socha, Paul Mackey, Brian Beglow, Julie Weems, Chris Mara, Michael James, Drew Lark. There is also information that there was another interesting track that was not included in the game. During the development of the soundtrack, Craig Connor and Grant Middleton created a hardcore rave track of about 180 BPM. BPM is the number of notes per minute, which was later declared unfit for game.
That's not all!
Almost immediately after the game was released, in 1997, a CD was released that contained the entire soundtrack, like a music album. Its name is Grand Theft Auto: The Soundtrack. Here is the story of the first game of the legendary series, or rather its soundtrack, or rather rock music from the soundtrack. I want to add that other tracks from other genres, techno, hip-hop, that are here are also quite interesting and professional, and if it is interesting, I advise you to listen them as well.
Bye, rockers!